All right, welcome traders to the end of day recap. It is Wednesday, Fed Day, and this is your end of day market and option recap. So let me start with the major indices, right? Because that's always where we want to start with first, just to look at the overall trend, and then kind of talk about today's themes, which there was a couple interesting ones today. So of course, with the Fed day, but we'll get into that. Let me just go over to the S&P chart first. One thing that I've been just monitoring is this upward trend line that has been pretty significant over the last couple months. It seems that even we kind of stalled out here back in the beginning of December, end of November. And it looks like we're kind of doing the same thing. Notice where we are. What are the major things I think to look at right now is the relative strength index, right? This measures how overbought or oversold we are, and we're running very, very hot right now. The the overall indices don't you normally stay overbought for that long, and we're cooking right now. We're at a 77. Anything over a 70, which is this line here, generally indicates overbought. Very different interpretation when you're looking at individual names. They could stay overbought for a long time, but generally the major indices, they don't. So we're very overbought. You have to ask yourself at this point, especially with going into quadruple watching on Friday, where a lot of things are going to trade. You got option expiration, index rebalances, futures expire, index futures expire. You have to ask yourself, how much more overbought are we going to get right here? So it may be a place to start to take a little bit of risk off and just wait for for a little bit of dip. What in a perfect world, what I'm looking for in the S&P is for us just to kind of cool off a little bit, just like we did in here. A couple red bars, and then we take the next leg higher. That would be perfect. I know this is a seasonally strong period. We got this possible Santa Claus rally, but I tend to seasonality is something that I'm cognizant of, but it's not one of my leading or not one of my favorite indicators or something to keep in mind. Always in the back of my mind, but not something that I think is just paramount. All right, so that's what the S&P looks like, and it looks like a couple of times we try to go higher and we just kind of stalled at that resistance. So there's no problem being a little bit patient here and waiting for a tiny pullback. Look at Nasdaq, basically almost back to a 52-week high as well, almost an MACD crossover. We'll see what happens. All these charts in the major indices, they look a little bit different. Even look at the diamonds, which we saw a little bit of call buying in. That actually looks the strongest out of the bunch. And I know the Dow is just 30 stocks. It's price weighted, so it's very biased. But if you look at small caps, I don't want to say that's a failure for small caps, but they did try to go higher. And listen, they still ended up the day over or finished the day over a 0.5%, which is strong. They were up close to 1% middle of the day. All right, so what happened with the Fed meeting? Not much. Everything that was expected was pretty much mentioned. There was no major surprises. However, this is what it's going to look like for going into 2018. Looks like hardly any of a probability for a January rate hike, but March. They did say 3 rate hikes is what they're expecting, which was exactly what they they were expecting going into the meeting. And so there really wasn't any major change, anything that I saw that was that notable. But you take a look at some of the things that moved today. Let's start with the dollar. You can look at UUP. So again, the dollar's been moving really sideways. I don't see like a swing trade to do here in the dollar, but it did go down 70 basis points today. So what happens when the dollar, it's always like kind of a chain reaction. When the dollar sells off, a whole bunch of other things happen. Gold really rallied today from the lows. Gold has been, just been taken out to the woodshed, I would say, below the 200-day moving average now. And a nice strong day, up 1.3%. Also, bonds rallied today. So there was these moves in the dollar, in bonds, and gold, in the metals, as well as in certain sectors that are very sensitive. So I put this out on Twitter, but I don't think people realize this. When you go into an international ETF, take, for example, FXI or EEM. what the ETF holds is local securities. So you're essentially, if you're holding, if that portfolio or that product is holding local securities, you're essentially long foreign currency and you're short the US dollar. So notice the bounce that these got today. Now, the overnight markets in Asia were very strong as well, but EM finished up 1.2%. And they got a kick the end of the day because, again, the dollar really started to sell off. So here was our opening, and throughout the session, especially when the dollar started to weaken, emerging markets got stronger because, again, these have a currency component to them. Same thing with FXI, which continued to rally. Again, Europe's, China and Asia are closed. So how are these moving up? It's all the currency. KWeb, which we talked about pre-market in the trading room. Why do I talk about this? Because when the Hang Seng is very strong overnight, which had finished up 1.5%, these China internet names, momentum names, tend to really follow that move overnight and rally. So, taking a look at the daily chart in the KWeb ETF, trying to again reclaim some more territory that was lost back here and pushing against some resistance. So we'll see if we get one more day possibly in here. When you break down this particular group, there's some really interesting eye catchers going on. Not necessarily with BABA. I think BABA is still a little bit challenged. It failed yesterday at the 50-day moving average. But look at the call volume that we saw today in JD.com right off the bat, and just kind of continued throughout the session. Some smaller stuff, some December stuff, but there was, if I can find it in here, there was a nice January trade that went up. Let's see, January. I don't see it right in front of me. I think I have it on my spreadsheet. No, for whatever reason, if there was a January 2019 call buyer. I can't find it. Maybe my eyes are a little tired at this point, but there was a nice January 2019 call buyer. Let's look at the chart because I think that's more revealing. So I have a trend line drawn here. I also have the value area study. So we're breaking out on top of value. Look at the close. We closed above value, above 40.45. So here's your buy signal. Also, look at this downward trend line. What a mess this thing has been for a couple months, but now above this white line, the 200-day moving average. So above the 200-day moving average, real powerful day, above the downward trend line. And then also look at your MACD indicator, buy signal as well. And look at the volume confirming the break higher here in JD.com. So again, after a lot of digestion, I really like this name. And let's see, I've got some resistance drawn up here as well. But a name that really hasn't participated in a while, catching a lot of momentum and some good volume. Another name in the space, we saw some call buying right at the end of the day in this one. I took this trade. This is YY. This is another China, momentum internet name. Notice MACD, just as I mentioned for the MACD on JD.com, not ready yet. Did not show a crossover, but it's starting to curl around. So you have to be careful with anticipating some of these because sometimes they don't actually cross over, but something to keep an eye on. And then also the 50-day, 50-day moving average is down here. The top of value is what I wanted to say. Also making higher. Remember, this name had good earnings and popped, coming back into support of the 20-day moving average pop, and it needs to stay above. Let's see if I get this level for you. 110.78. That was resistance, now becomes support as we got to close over there. I did take that trade and I'm long. I will probably get long JD.com tomorrow. I have a lot of exposure in this space, so it's tough. It's tough for me to kind of take every trade in the name, but I really like the JD.com setup. Speaking of emerging markets, South Africa. When was the last time that you saw a call buyer in South Africa? There was a really nice call buyer. I took this trade for I think 220, so real nice winner in the trading room today. EZA. I always want to put EWA in here. Let's try it again. EZA. You can see just 1,000 contracts, but went up really aggressively. Opening trade, January 60 calls, a nice $260,000 of option premium. So I took this trade. I got in, I think, for around, I got in actually better than they did. I got in for 230, and I was taking targets up to 320. So really nice move. Couple other, continuation movers that we've talked about. FXI, not FXI, which also had a nice day. FCX, look at this thing. So I had just gotten out of a December trade, December 22nd trade, and I mentioned in last night's video, what did I do? Just like a hedge fund, I took part of the profits and I rolled them out. So this was a trade that I got into for 28 cents, the December 22 maturity. I can't remember the strike for 28 cents, and I took it off yesterday for 80 cents. But look at the upside it had today. So I rolled that December 22nd position over to a January position and took profits in that today after a 3.9% move. So absolutely crushed it in this name. What a great signal that was back here. Couple other names that drew my attention to got my attention today. Already mentioned the JD calls. Apple, there was some Apple calls right off the open. I didn't see how Apple finished on the day, but I think a lot of people starting to look at this as it's been started to make the turn here now in value. Resistance would be up here at 175, so another interesting name. A couple other unusual names, again, the cryptocurrency names, which we've been all over these names. The DPW. We got into today Grow. This is U.S. global investors. They have a stake in. We tried this when this Hive blockchain got halted today. It actually finished down 9% today. So while it was halted, it did catch a bid. I took some of the trade off for nice profits, and I'm sitting with the balance. We'll see how it works its way out for Grow. Again, this is U.S. global investors. They have a stake in Hive blockchain. The support where I would bail on this trade, again, took a trade at 520. 524, which is exactly where where it closed. I believe my cost basis is 524, and we took a target. Thank you, value areas. Perfectly played. Where did I take my target? Right here. 579 is where I took my target. I'm still holding the balance of it, so we'll see what it does. Again, if it can't hold this level, I will bail on it. 482. Right. So the whole thing with these cryptocurrency names is, these things are catching a lot of momentum. My view is, the music's going to stop eventually. But is that like, why let that prevent you from trying to trade? As long as you're being disciplined and you know what size to put on. These are very high volatile names, so you can't put on like a full swing trade position or a day trade position. They're just a little bit too volatile for that. But as long as you're being cognizant of support, resistance, using the moving averages, it's the same thing in Riot, which I got out of yesterday. Why did I get out of Riot yesterday? Because it broke the 50-day moving average on the right here. Once it started to creep down, this was a position I got in for around $8, and I took it off for I think 28. And I didn't catch the absolute high of 33.27 because again, you're never going to be able to catch the high. If you are, you're extremely lucky. So you stay into it until it breaks, until it breaks down a little bit. Looking at a couple different time frames, this looked like a really toppy looking candle for the day. So, we played this one. A number of members played this as well. Great job. And that's all it is. All it is lines on a chart. So forget about like, oh my God, it's crazy. They shouldn't be going up this fast. Just be super disciplined. Put your level and take it off when it starts to move the other way. It's not rocket science. It's really not. It's not that hard. You just have to get it out of your head. They're just lines on a chart. And if these things are going to gap up and move up that quickly, I want to make money. You just have to be disciplined with if it breaks and doesn't go the right way right away, you get out of it, move on to something else. Not so complicated. The other thing I want to mention here is, let's see, one or two other names. Serve. Not a name that I don't think I've ever traded before. Service Master. A bunch of calls went up here right on a 52-week high. Another name, so I'm not really sure what to do with this name yet. The first time that I've seen call buying in it, SERV. I keep typing things incorrectly. You can see the total volume on this thing was 16,000 shares of the Feb 55 calls. So I don't know. Maybe somebody knows something, but I don't generally like to start a position on a 52-week high. So maybe something to see if it pulls in a little bit. But certainly, if we go through a whole bunch of names and we look for really aggressive trades that hit the tape every day. But it's just basically to look for ideas. I don't send out everything that we see on the tape out on Twitter. That's just confusing people. So I really, will keep a list of names that have aggressive option activity, just to see if they repeat. Something to catch your eye. Another one that I'll talk about, just probably leave the day for this one. But Boyd Gaming, this is one that we've seen repeat call activity. And a couple of people asked me about this in the trading room today, and they said, "Well, what do you think about Boyd?" And I said, listen, the trend looks great. This is a trending stock. This is, if you're in this for like a pop, if you look at the order flow that and this is how it's been going the whole time, like this whole move up in Boyd Gaming, they're buying small things. I mean, if you look at some of these trades, like, let me just make sure I'm looking at just the sweep trades. So I want slash two. Look at how they're trading these. Right. This is an aggressive trade. Implied volatility is moving up, but it's basically like this trade is $22,000. Right. This is peanuts. However, it just shows steady buying, steady accumulation. So you want to get into a trade and just think about it as like this is not a name that unless there's something else going on that I don't know about, it's not going to pop. Just stick with the trend. Pick wherever you want to get in it. Use this blue line, which is the 20 period moving average, as your stop. That's it. Again, it's simple. They're accumulating very lightly throughout this uptrend. So stay with the trend. You don't have to get in large here. You could try to wait for a dip back to the 20, but it's at a 45 degree angle up and to the right. So this is more of a grinding trade that's been working really well. So that's the way you have to kind of think about it for those names where we see like really small repeat aggressive option activity. All right, so that's enough for today. It should be interesting the rest of the week. Like I said, we're pretty overbought here, and we'll continue to look for those rotations in the marketplace. So that's it for tonight. Have a great night, and see you tomorrow.